The debate between the Big 12 and the ACC being the next best conference may have just taken a little bit of a back seat, with more conference realignment chaos inevitably on its way. This will have an effect to some degree on the Big 12, and it might even affect our Cowboys, who just 2 years ago were safe in any realignment conversation.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at Aldeo State. Today, we get to roll right into the conversation of the Big 12, the ACC. This has been a debate back and forth on who's going to be the third best conference. From a football perspective, I feel like the Big 12 definitely answered that question this previous season, but with the new news that the ACC has decided to reach some sort of agreement with Clemson and Florida State, it does put the future of the ACC in a lot of jeopardy, which will have an effect on the Big 12. Just earlier today, Pete Thamel put out this tweet: new exit fee formula for the ACC per the Clemson Public Board meeting. It's $165 million in fiscal year 2026. The fee descends by $18 million per year until it's $75 million 2030 and 2031, leveling off. The member would leave with their media rights right after paying the fee. So what do we know? We know that Clemson and Florida State seemingly have won this battle to the ACC. We also know now there's going to be an uneven revenue sharing predicated upon not only talent, not only production, but also the TV viewership ratings. Now, where I find this thing interesting is the number gradually goes down between now and 2030 on the exit fees. This is largely discussing Florida State and Clemson, but I have a little bit more of a question in regards to how does Miami fan base feel? How does Georgia Tech's fan base feel? What about Pitt? What about Louisville? I know from a TV viewership numbers perspective, there's going to be a little trepidation amongst some of those fan bases, but on the same token, how are they not going to be at least some level of irritated that Florida State and Clemson are seemingly pushing all of this and the ACC is caving to some degree to those two universities, when from a brand perspective, Miami is up there, and from a viewership perspective, Georgia Tech was even one of the tops in the ACC this previous season. Does that mean that Georgia Tech and Miami are going to be the next best thing for anybody in conference realignment? Well, I don't exactly know, but I do know that this will have an effect on the Big 12. And everybody is talking about, well, what conferences are going to bring in new guys? What SEC teams would be interested for Clemson and Florida State to come in? Same could be said for the Big 10. How does this affect what Notre Dame is currently doing? Or does it have any effect on Notre Dame at all? As it pertains to Oklahoma State just a couple of years ago was safe under any conversational pieces regarding the conference realignment because of the history of Oklahoma State in the last 2 decades, the winning formula, the 18 straight bowl games, the fact that Mike Gundy, whether you like him, love him, or hate him, he is the most legendary coach in Oklahoma State history. And Mark Emmert, former NCAA coach or commissioner, has come out and said in the past that he believes that there's going to be a big split at some point in time, essentially the top 50-ish teams in the country, and it'll be primarily based off of the financial compensation numbers that you received in the previous year. Now, when this conversation started happening, Oklahoma State had a long history. We had another bowl game, and then we found a way to catapult that into a Big 12 championship appearance against Texas. So amongst all of that, Oklahoma State was safe, whether it be going to the SEC or going to a different conference, or Oklahoma State was going to be safe while we brought more people into the Big 12. And of course, there's been some stuff coming out about Texas Tech potentially having the opportunity to leave the Big 12 once again. Same could be said of a couple other schools in the conference. Now, I don't think that debate is as viable as what happens with the ACC. And as much as I want to sit here and say that I firmly still believe that Miami and Louisville and Pitt and some of those schools, Virginia Tech even, could potentially end up in the Big 12, the real question is, does the Big 12 find a way to trim some fat to bring on some new universities? Is the ACC going to have the capability to push itself up into this realignment conversation to where they find some solidarity amongst themselves. But my thing is, I don't think that's going to happen. Just like in the Big 12, when OU and Texas were getting more money than everybody else, they unfortunately were able to make decisions that affected everybody else in the conference, and we all just kind of had to sit back and deal with it. That instability is what led to the Big 12 essentially losing those individuals and being on the precipice of potentially falling apart. Thankfully, Brett Yormark is the visionary that we have been looking forward to this whole time, and he was able to kind of take down the Pac-12 a little bit quicker than a lot of prognostications had out there. Enter Arizona State, Arizona. Of course, you bring in Colorado and BYU. I think that all of those have been phenomenal additions to the conference. Colorado has Coach Prime. Coach Prime just helped lead Travis Hunter to a Heisman Trophy campaign. We also have Arizona State that pushed Texas to the very, very limit. In other sports, you're going to have some teams like Houston and Arizona be able to kind of carry a very heavy load while also having the mainstays like Iowa State and KU that likely are going to give people some problems no matter what happens. With this entire new outlook, how does it look for Oklahoma State? Well, if we continue to have 3-9 seasons, which I do not see happening, then we could potentially fall into the land of uncertainty. Because unfortunately, Cincinnati has proven that when you bring a team in based off of emotions, it doesn't always go right. And I'm pulling for Cincinnati. But at the same time, losing Luke Fickell was a big deal. Losing Luke Fickell to an upper to mid-level Big Ten program should have been some sort of indication that maybe things in Cincinnati, at least for Luke Fickell's eyes, were not going to be as big, bright, and beautiful as leaving for Wisconsin. So I think most of us would deduce that Cincinnati may not have been the greatest of additions to the Big 12 so far. And if there's going to be this two-division split thing, then you have to go into, well, who makes it and who doesn't. And before you even get to that two-division thing, the top 50 team scenario, then you have to talk about, is the Big 12 going to be alive to even make this conversational piece worthwhile? Brett Yormark has proven to do some things that have kind of catapulted us into relevance, even more so than previously thought. But whether it's the naming rights deal or the billion-dollar investment scenario, that stuff needs to potentially have more meat to it, more teeth to it, because we have to do something. Outside of winning, which we didn't beat Texas, right? Arizona State didn't beat Texas, which was a little bit of a knock on the Big 12. And in basketball, the Big 12 has been running everything for years now, but that has kind of subsided to some degree this year to the SEC. Now, March Madness, that is going to be where the proof comes out. So if the Big 12 puts 3 teams in the Elite Eight, which I do think between Houston and Arizona State, Iowa State, and of course you got to throw KU into the mix as a team that could potentially make things interesting. But the top of the Big 12 is pretty squared away between Houston and Arizona and Iowa State and BYU. And then you have Kansas. We're going to have some other teams likely make it into the dance. But that conversation could change a little bit, just like the football conversation could change with some years to come. Because Miami might feel some type of way about Florida State and Clemson being the leaders of the clubhouse now. Georgia Tech might feel some type of way about their ratings and their viewership being good, but them not getting the same level of respect as some of the other schools in the ACC in Miami. Miami still carries a big stick. Yeah, they may have been down a little bit, but it's still brand recognition. It's still viewership. So from a Big 12 perspective, yes, I would love some of the ACC schools to come to the Big 12. But the question becomes for the Big 12 to remain relevant, and part of the conversational pieces, do we have to trim some fat? We just brought in Houston, yet they're not really spending enough in NIL from a football standpoint to make themselves give anybody the warm and fuzzy feeling that they're going to be a productive member of the Big 12 football picture. But if they go to the Final Four, if they play for a natty, win a natty in basketball, then it really sorts itself out. There's not a lot that Brett Yormark has done that I haven't been a big fan of. So I have faith in Brett Yormark doing what is necessary to keep the Big 12 as a viable candidate for any realignment conversations. Speaking of, one of the few things that I haven't thought that he's done overly well, you know what? Actually, we'll get to that in a second, because you got to worry about supplies. That's right. Supply House is who you are going to need the next time that you're trying to get the supplies you need if you have skills in a trade. Welcome to Supply House. Whether it be plumbing, HVAC, electrical, it doesn't really matter. Supply House is the reliable way for you to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done correctly. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. If you need help with an order, Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading services, so you'll always talk to a real person. And the trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trademaster program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it is your turn to do the same. Join the Trademaster program today at supplyhouse.com/TN and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, electrical, and other supplies with just a few clicks. Make sure that you use the promo code S-H-5 for 5% off your order. That is supplyhouse.com. Get that 5% off your first order so that you know that the supplies are going to keep on coming and you can get things done more efficiently with Supply House. Speaking of efficiency, the one knock I've had on Brett Yormark thus far is not even the tinkering with potentially adding UConn or Gonzaga for basketball only. I know he's a basketball guy, and he's very astute when it comes to how to conduct basketball things with his history in the NBA, the Brooklyn Nets. Even to some degree, he branched off and did miraculous things for NASCAR. So I have faith in Brett Yormark to continue to keep the Big 12 at the forefront of most conversations, regardless of what is happening with conference realignment. But on top of that, the rivalries. Come on, Brett Yormark. From an Oklahoma State standpoint, Texas Tech is supposed to be the next natural rivalry. And you know what? With them now having Boone Pickens money, this conversation could really grow some legs between Oklahoma State and Texas Tech becoming a new rival. Utah. If Utah would have had a good season, they likely would be in the conversation to be a new rival, because Oklahoma State and Utah should be the flag bearers of the new Big 12. Yet, both of which had horrendous seasons, both of which had the worst seasons under Kyle Whittingham and Mike Gundy. So that flag bearer conversation really has to take a little bit of a backseat. And even if we were going to be rivals with Utah, we don't play them this year. So it makes it really difficult, just like we didn't play Texas Tech last year. The first year of all of the new Big 12, and you don't even have Oklahoma State versus Texas Tech. Now, I do know that Farmageddon is continuing to some degree. They're going to change it up, which I think is wild, but we're leaning on the Holy War. So the conversation we just had about the ACC potentially having teams available in the next few years to join the Big 12, that could even muddy the waters more on what the rivalry situation could potentially possibly be. Now, West Virginia versus Pitt, backyard brawl, bring it on. I absolutely love it. Having more geographical partners for UCF, that could be something that is advantageous for us, especially if it's a Miami. That could be a rivalry that is worth exploring, because Miami fans, they can't stand UCF. They think that they're the little annoying brother, and that won't get out of their hair. Yet they've had a lot of success against the in-state other Florida schools recently. So that could be a conversation worth having, a viability of new rivalries. But as Oklahoma State fans just recently figured out, Iowa wrestling does not like us. Angelo Ferrari feels some type of way about Oklahoma State for whatever reason. And of course, they're not going to be happy that we took the number one wrestler in the state of Iowa, Drayshawn Rosh, away from them. They're not going to be happy that we were able to lure away Jax Forrest. Now, of course, they did win the Bo Bassett sweepstakes, if that's what you want to call it. just simply because we're not going to pay their kind of money to land, a very, very talented individual. But when you get number 2 and 3 ranked wrestlers in America, it doesn't matter. And now with nationals about to be in our picture screens, we have the opportunity to prove that Iowa beating us in Iowa City was to some degree a fluke. So is Iowa our next natural rivalry? And if it is, then we need to start scheduling them in other sports, whether it be basketball, women's basketball. It doesn't really matter. Football, of course, that would be kind of fun. And with their inability to typically produce an offense, you got to feel pretty good as Cowboy fans that we would beat Iowa in football, regardless of what their ranking is. You let me know down in the comment section for all of you out here on YouTube. Who do you think should be our next national rival? Because I could be potentially missing somebody. I'm rocking Arizona State gear right now because I think it is good for the Big 12 for Arizona State to be good again at wrestling, to be good again at baseball, to continue to be good at football. I love the Kenny Dillingham story. I feel like there's a lot of comparisons with him and Mike Gundy, both being similar, somewhat local guys that grew up around the campus, that went to that university, that would do anything to not only get this job, but maintain this job. And I think you have seen Mike Gundy recently with all of the staff getting removed and replaced. It could show that Mike Gundy understands that the lay of the land is a little bit different, and he needs to get behind some things. He needs to get behind some of the changes, and that has us in Oklahoma State country pretty excited, especially if you look at the transfers and things of that nature that we've been able to bring in since we've brought in Doug Meacham and Todd Grantham as the OC and the DC. I would love nothing more than to have another Bedlam-style rivalry built into this conversation. And speaking of Bedlam, yeah, I had to throw some shade at OU canceling their spring game because I saw so many fans talking down on Oklahoma State and Mike Gundy and how poor we were and how unserious we were about football. So if you are one of those handfuls of fans that were not throwing shade at Oklahoma State and you absolutely hate the fact that OU is not having a spring game, I apologize to you, but you need to go holler at the rest of your peoples because they have a lot to say. And it's typically disparaging things about Oklahoma State, especially the spring game. So it's kind of funny when the shoe's on the other foot and OU fans completely change their tune. But we don't have an OU right now. We can't be rivals with Kansas State because we all love each other too much. And I think the argument can be said to some degree about Iowa State, even though 2011 field goal was good. There are some Cowboys that will never let that go. So there might be some animosity with Iowa State building. And we do get to finish the season with Iowa State at home in Stillwater, America. But I want more rivalries. I want more animosity. I mean, UCF beat us in the bounce house. I don't know that I'd like to give them the satisfaction of considering them a potential rival, but we go back to the bounce house again this season. So that could change the game in baseball. We might be back. We might be getting close to back, but UCF's a pretty good ball club. Arizona is going to be an issue. I think Arizona State is already a severely underrated ball club. West Virginia is undefeated. KU's 10-1 was one of the best pitchers, not only in the country, or not only in the conference, but in the country as well. So we want more rivalries. What we do not need is Farmageddon not being played every single year. What we do not need is the Holy War to ever change, because right now that is the cream of the crop when it comes to rivalries in this conference. That is the only thing that Brett Yormark has done that I have not been a big fan of, and not finding ways to build new rivalries or add some water and some seeds to grow new rivalries, I think is a miss. I think it's a miss by Brett Yormark. It's a miss by the Big 12. And in all of the shakeups that are happening in the ACC and potentially more coming for college football and all athletics in general, give us rivalries, because Rivalry Saturday is a big deal. And if you're not having some of your best programs playing on that day, then you're losing an opportunity here. So you let me know down in the comment section who should be our next rival. Naturally, Texas Tech, possibly Utah. Could it be Arizona State? Could it be Arizona? Because I cannot stand Oregon because of the things they chanted a couple of years ago. Not a big fan of Arizona after everything they were chanting recently as well. So my love for the Cats has diminished a little bit. They could swing me back around. but they're going to have to do some major things in March Madness or in baseball. And speaking of, are the Cowboys back? We all know how annoying it was to hear Texas always say we're back every single year in football, and it took them until 2023 before they had finally arrived again. Oklahoma State baseball, I don't want to say that we're 100% back to the levels that we're accustomed to being, which is competing for Big 12 championships, competing to host regionals, to host super regionals, and possibly make a run at Omaha. Now, over the weekend, I did get lumped in with some of the we suck, fire Josh Holiday, we're terrible crowd. I don't know how, but nonetheless, I did. And I find it kind of crazy because the only things I've said are that if Josh Holiday's refusing to address the fact that Walton is starting to look like a Casey Dunn situation, then we could have problems there towards the end of the season. At the end of the year, if he's not willing to address the fact that Rob Walton has been an inconsistency in major moments, then perhaps we have a conversation with Josh Holiday. But I would imagine that Josh, much like Mike Gundy this previous season, can see the lay of the land. Mike Gundy did not want to get rid of Casey Dunn. His hand was kind of forced. That hand should potentially be forced with Rob Walton. I also have said that we're currently not playing like an Omaha level club. I don't understand how this is controversial. But we did beat number 1 in the country, Texas A&M. And we did beat number 15 in the country, Mississippi State. We put up a valiant effort against Clemson. We put up a valiant effort against Tennessee. And Tennessee is legitimately that good. So maybe comparing Oklahoma State to Tennessee is a little far-fetched. And maybe after beating Texas A&M and Mississippi State, the Cowboys are officially back. I just don't know that I fully believe it quite yet. Do we have the most talent in the Big 12? Absolutely. Do we have some of the best talent in all of the country? Yes. Are we getting the most out of them? That I do not know. And as it sits right now, we're down 2-1 to Winthrop. I don't know a whole lot about Winthrop baseball, but I do know that the Cowboys have too much talent for this to be a situation, for this to even to be that big of a conversation. And when I was watching the Winthrop game before we came on here, they were just essentially peppering little base hits here and there. They were playing small ball. That is my biggest frustration with Cowboy baseball is our inability to play small ball, even though we've had guys in the past like Jackson Kroll that could do that very thing. I think you could even throw Tyler Wolford into that camp of somebody who could go yard, but also somebody who could play a little bit of small ball. That's been a massive frustration of mine for a few years now. It is great recruiting 6'6", 6'7", 230, 250 pound dudes. I love it. Okay. I'm happy that we're able to do that. But the consistency has been a problem. And when we play teams that have equal talent or not even equal talent, some semblance of talent, but they have the ability to play small ball, they have ability to kind of orchestrate their mound rotation around our hitting. Those are the things that good ball clubs do. And I'm not questioning whether Josh Holiday is good at the game of baseball, but I think it's fair to question his decision-making. It's fair to question his inability to push Rob Walton to make some changes, to do some things a little bit differently. Do I think we have the best baseball team in the conference? Talent-wise, absolutely. Do I firmly believe in Rob Walton to get the most out of everybody? No, I do not. Do I trust Rob Walton to manage the mound efficiently? No, I don't. Do I trust Josh Holiday to convince the players to stop swinging for home runs every single AB? Not entirely, but I do have faith in Josh Holiday's ability. I do have faith in Josh Holiday's love for Oklahoma State. So if he sees the writing on the wall and things need to change, I can get behind him being the guy to change it. All righty, y'all. I reckon that's all we're going to have for this one right here. As always, you know I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here in Locked On Oklahoma State. You could be anywhere, so happy you choose to be here. Like it if you like the daggone thing. Dislike if you don't. That's okay too. More importantly, share, comment, and subscribe my podcast. And people out there, you're the bricks, the bread, the butter, the fountain, the fondue, the funny stuff, the funky stuff. Do what you do. Hit the stars. Leave a review. I appreciate you. All righty, y'all. Later, taters.